Hi guys, welcome to the channel, and if you don't already know, this channel is going to be about the Atlas series. I'm just breaking down each part, video by video. It's going to be a very long series, so I hope that you have patience. So this emoji here is here for a reason, because this video is actually a very in-depth breakdown of the psychology behind the iceberg. And really it's just going to get into I know you might not want to hear this, but it's going to get into Freud. I know. And but some of it is from Freud, and then some of it is just like kind of what I picked up through life. So I'll try to piece the puzzles together for you. Anyways, let's go ahead and get right into it, just because this might be a little bit of a long video. Okay, so first thing we see here is an iceberg, and the name of the first episode is The Boy in the Iceberg. So I didn't even really think about this when I made my glaciers video. If you haven't seen that, it's like one of my first videos. You can go see that right now if you want. And that is just talking about how the glaciers they could represent something for the water tribe, such as like a form of protection, a way for them to numb their emotions long enough so that they can have self-discipline, right? So it's a form of like self-discipline. Now, going from that thought into, the first time that we see Aang, where he's appearing in a iceberg, I realized in the last video I mentioned the word ego, and I really need to. The reason why I'm making this video is so that you have the definition of ego properly in your mind, just because I want to make sure that you don't think that I'm judging any of the characters. I love all the characters, so just so you know, when I throw out the word ego, I don't mean any judgment by it. So okay, so let's take a look at this picture. First thing you have here is you see the classic. So when I looked, all I did was type in id, superego, and ego into Google, and I came up with a Freudian image of the iceberg, and I was like, oh my goodness, mind blown that that the first episode is called Boy in the Iceberg, and that I was just talking about glaciers. So I figured I had to go ahead and make a video out of it. Okay, so what lies above the water is the things that we're conscious of, our conscious mind. So I'll list them here for you. It could be your self-image, your thoughts, your awareness, your perception, things like that. Things that you are aware of, things that you know about yourself, things that you know other people know about you. Okay, so, and then you have the unconscious, which is located beneath the water, which often in these iceberg analogies, the unconscious is the bigger part of a person. It's the part that is unseen, but it's has to do with a lot of our past, what makes us who we are, and all those things. So let me go ahead and list this for you. So the things that are unconscious are our urges, our fears, any guilt or shame that we hold, or selfish desires. If we don't want to work in a group or something, we just want our own selfish needs to be met, things like that. So these can also be things that people, they kind of seep out of your without your conscious awareness. They seep out without your conscious awareness. So what happens is that other people see this side of you, but you are completely unconscious of this. You don't know that you do this until it's brought to your attention, right? Okay, so let's move on to the next one, where it says, so this is basically a triangle relationship between the the id, the ego, and the superego. This is basically the terms that Freud coined. He also talked about the unconscious and the conscious. So that's all from him. All of those, like, that the id is always submerged, completely unconscious. It's your urges. Like, he basically said, like, when you're a baby, that's when you have all your id urges, and they're completely raw. Like, when a baby wants to eat, it wants to eat, and you know it. So that is and also what he says, Freud says, is that the superego and ego are later come into the picture, because the superego is kind of like our morals, the way we conduct ourselves in society, and the ego is basically the diplomat in between the id and the superego. So basically, if a baby, if a person is a more developed person is like hungry, and they happen to be at a meeting and nobody else is eating, and they know that it wouldn't be like either morally right, or they know it's not socially right to eat in front of other people or eat during the meeting, then their ego kind of kicks in and says, like, it's the diplomat between the id, the urges, and what society wants from us, right? So it'll say something like, okay, maybe at the end of the meeting I'll get something to eat, and that's its compromise. So that happens like on a daily basis for us. And that is basically the theory that Freud presented. Now, I don't know if the next parts that I'm going to tell you are exactly from Freud. They probably are. But I've just been carrying them around in my head for so long that I don't actually have any sources for them. So, what my understanding is yes, the id are our urges, just like in this picture. But what happens is Freud also talks about like our two basic urges, right? So the two basic urges that we have, which are contained within the id, are the need to like bond or to fit in, and our sense of survival, our need to survive, right? So those are our two basic urges. Now, I haven't ever read anything about Freud saying the next part, where I think what happens is our id actually splits into two, and that's how we get the superego and ego. So the superego is the part of us that wants to like bond either with our caregiver, parental units, or society, or groups, or fit in, and everything like that. And the ego is the mechanism that takes care of our survival instinct, right? It keeps us alive. It mediates between acknowledging id urges, like I want to eat, and actually being able to incorporate that into our lives, while we also are trying to have like bonds and attachments with outside people. So the ego goes in between that. So I do agree in that sense with Freud that it was like that. I just think that this id split into two. And you can see that right here in this picture where it says like the bonding and the self-survival. So then what happens is we see that parts of the superego and the ego are underwater, and parts of the superego and the ego are above water, and all of the id is submerged. So that means that all of our urges and impulses, they're generally like an unconscious thing for us. They're not something that we're like constantly thinking about until they come up, and they also are not something that they're also not something that like we use our conscious energy to focus on until the urge arises. Like those urges just kind of come out of nowhere, either from our body, which you could also say that like our body is part of the id urges and impulses that we get. So you see here that let's talk about the first part of so we know that the id is completely submerged, and that's completely conscious. There's no part of the id that's conscious. And then what we have here is the super ego. The parts of the super ego that are unconscious are things like shame, because the super conscious is like things that we want from like bonding either with people or fitting in society. And what happens is if we don't fit in to a certain group or where we want to fit in society, or if we don't have as good connections with the people around us that we want, a lot of times we're going to feel shame. Or the shame is actually like a self-fulfilling prophecy where you feel shame so you don't fit in, and you don't fit in because you feel shame, and you feel shame because you don't fit in, and then you can't fit in because you're feeling so much shame. So, or the shame is acting out in a bad habit, right? So these things that are unconscious, they can also be like bad habits. And then you have the superego, which is above conscious level, and that's our morals. Those are things that are like acceptable to society, and they're perfectly okay to basically wear on your shoulder. People are okay with people having morals and having a conscience and everything like that. So the next part that is above water, so it's conscious, is the ego. That was the ego that I was talking about, where it compromises. It basically plays the role of the diplomat. And that's a very like conscious thing, like, okay, we can problem solve, right? That's where problem solving comes in. That's like a solution oriented and diplomatic type of arrangement that we have going on. Like even making goals, that could be like something. It's a good thing. Like our ego is not always, that's why I kind of wanted to make this video, because our ego is not always like a bad thing. There are really important parts to the ego. Like it keeps us alive and it keeps us going, right? So like goals, or like like just basic taking care of your own needs. And then the thing is like we also have a part of the ego, as you can see, where the line is drawn. This part is from Freud, where that line is drawn. So where that line is drawn, it's underneath the water, which means it's part of the unconscious. So, I mean, sometimes our self-image is also like a conscious part of us, like the part that we want. That would be the part that would be above the water. But in this area, what I'm referencing to is something that really nobody talks about. It's like, the classic the classic like vanity story, or story about like having so much pride. A lot of the times we're not aware of just how much pride we have that's controlling our actions and leading to bad habits, or leading to bad decisions and things like that. The same thing can go for vanity, or like your self-image. It's that classic picture of the little kitten looking at itself in the mirror, and it sees a lion, right? So it's like that's the self-image with pride and vanity. So which can sometimes lead to like bad habits or bad decision making. But it can also like keep you alive as well, right? So when you look at yourself in the mirror and you see a lion, I mean, like that's a sense of confidence, and that's actually something that we can be very conscious of. And I think, like I said, those things are really great. I don't think that that's a bad part of the ego or anything. So I just wanted to clear that up. And just to relate this back to the story, in the last video that I was making, I said that Katara was even telling her brother that he was looking at his own reflection in the water, and here you see him doing just that. And I would say that this part of Sokka's experience would be probably categorized underneath the ego that is probably less conscious, right? This is like the one where he's maybe he's trying to give himself more confidence, but also there's just, there's like these unconscious things that seep out, like his pride is getting a hold of him or something like that. Okay, I just want to bring this all together where you can see the unconscious is everything below the water and the conscious is everything above the water, and there's really only a little bit of the superego and ego that's above the water. So I just want to display that for you so you guys have that in mind when I'm talking about like somebody's ego. So the thing is that this entire iceberg is still the ego, right? When I refer to it, I often am going to be referring to the unconscious part of the iceberg. Like when somebody says, "Oh, your ego's getting the best of you," that means that the unconscious part of us is like getting the best of us. It's creating like a bad habit, or it's creating like a bad experience for us. That would be like your classic macho man who drives a huge truck in order to compensate for his insecurities or something like that, So those types of things are actually like things that drive our decisions, and that is the part that could be kind of, maybe detrimental in the long term at least. So I just wanted to put it out there just so people understood like what I was talking about when I was saying the word ego. And also I wanted to show you this last image here that I made where you have all of the pieces put together. So you have the conscious, the unconscious, you have your urges for the id, and your superego is, in charge of like bonding, and it creates morals so that it can function in society. And sometimes those morals actually lead to shame or guilt. A lot of time guilt, like that's your classic, maybe like a classic religious archetype. And then you have your ego, who is like compromising between the id and superego. That's from Freud. And also underneath the water you have your ego that has like your self-image, so all the components that go into self-image, like how I talked about the pride and the vanity, or like being a macho man in order to make up for your insecurities. That's where that tiny little part of the ego is unconscious for us, and it's what takes care of like our survival, right? Just like a lot of the time that part of our ego is trying to build our confidence so that we can survive. That's like, a major function of the ego. Okay, so now you see why I have all of these hyper thinking emojis, and let me know if you understood the concepts that I presented here. I can try to break down this video even more if you need. Otherwise, I hope that this was a good reference video for you, because I'm probably going to be referencing this throughout the whole series. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye bye.